Excuse me, but what do you think of Pepperidge Farm?
Pepperidge Farm knows.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Nah, I'm over here now. Pepperidge Farm knows.
Nah, I'm over here now. Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Oh, wait a minute now. You're everybody, I'm nobody. You're the big shot now. Excuse me. We'll talk about this later. Right now, I gotta kill somebody.
So I wanted to talk about the first Christmas with the NES and why this was the watershed moment and what made me into the gamer that I am right now. And I want to talk about what made the NES so phenomenal and the games that were launched in Christmas of 1986 and why it had a lasting impact in the gaming space as a whole. So sit back, relax, and let's take a stroll down memory lane as the wise one remembers Christmas of 1986 with the NES. So, there were consoles before the NES. The most famous one was the 2600. While the games were pretty okay for the time, they were very basic and very simple. I mean, they mostly included only 4 or 5 screens at most. Most of the games were only on one screen at a time. And once you played 10 minutes of, like, say, Pitfall, you saw pretty much all Pitfall had to offer you. And it kept going over and over again. There was no real end to Pitfall. There was no real end to a lot of the games there, like Combat or Kaboom or whatever. But the nail in the coffin for the 2600 was E.T. Now, E.T., when it was launched in 83, was the biggest movie of all time at that time. And when there was a game for Atari based off of E.T., all of the kids, myself included, was really excited to play it. However, the game sucked. I mean, like, it was one of those things where there was only 5 screens, and you played this little pixelated little Jabba the Hutt looking thing that was supposed to be E.T., and all E.T. could do was, like, raise and lower its head, and the main goal was to go around these 5 screens, falling into wells, and building this phone so E.T. can phone. The problem was you needed 6 of those fucking things, and I could only find 5, and then I would try to find the 6th one so I can finish it, but I would never be able to find it, and I would end up dying in the process, and I'd have to start the whole thing again. And this frustration was not just my frustration, but the frustration of all my friends who played this game, and we absolutely hated it. And that's pretty much what sort of took us away from gaming at that point. And that's actually what caused what we call the 83 video game crash, because a lot of kids were, like, really anticipating this game, and when they played it, they're like, yeah, this sucks. So we put it on the side. We still had our Atari connected. We did on occasion play it, but we never were, like, regular playing these games. But then something happened in 1986 which changed everything. And this was the launch of the NES, which actually stands for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo was smart in this regard because they knew they were trying to make inroads into the US market, and the US market just got burned by Atari and all of this other stuff. And Nintendo had to basically come in and take this and salvage what was left of the video game market. So instead of marketing the console as a video game system, they marketed it as an entertainment system. And there were 2 bundles. There was one which just had the NES console, and the other bundle had the NES console, the gun, and Rob, the video game robot. And the whole appeal was, this is more than just a gaming system. This was stuff that you can, like, pull a trigger and you can see something happen on the screen. You could play with this robot, and the robot, you could also help you during the game. It was totally different. Plus, the games that were on the console, famously Super Mario Brothers, the only other way we could have played it was in an arcade. And obviously, we were not used to seeing arcade level graphics at home. So yeah, when we were able to see that, hey, these are the types of games that we can play, and these are the types of games that we saw in the arcade, of course, all the kids were pumped. I got the console, and I got 5 games with it. It came packed in with these 2 games called Duck Hunt and Gyromite, and it was on 1 cartridge. But then also, my parents picked up for this console, they picked up 3 more games: Excite Bike, Kung Fu, and famously Super Mario Brothers. So the way the NES worked was you would insert a cassette or a cartridge and you would push it down. But sometimes the NES would, even if you would put the cartridge in, it would not work. So you would have to take the NES out, blow into the connectors, and put it in. That's where all the memes started with blowing into the cartridge. When I got it, at first I didn't think I was going to get it. When I got it, I freaking erupted. And I opened the box, I got the robot out. I was keen on playing with the robot. And the first game I plugged in or played was Gyromite. And you've got to understand, with Gyromite, the way it controlled was you controlled it with a joypad, which was different than the Atari altogether. Because remember, Atari had the joystick with a little one red button. The joypad for the NES had both a B and an A, and it had an up, down, left, right, and it had select and start, which was unheard of, and it made gaming more comfortable. So it allowed for more longer play sessions than you would have typically had been able to do with a joystick. And that joypad not only controlled the robot, the Rob robot, but also controlled your in-game character. Now, something about this in-game character, right? This in-game character actually looked like a little scientist. He looked like the character that they showed on the box art of the game. And that was phenomenal because remember, before this, all of the character models were all rectangular, and we had to use a little bit of foresight and imagination to imagine what that character was. We didn't have to do that anymore because that character actually looked like a character, you know, and it was really good. And it had and also the game had this addictive background music, and it was a single MIDI loop, but it was good for the time, and it kept you engaged as well. Then, as you control the controller, the robot would move, and the robot would put these little gyros on these certain levers. And these levers, once it would put it on these certain levers, it would cause certain things to move up and down in game, which was phenomenal for the time because we'd never seen anything like this. Remember, this is the gaming in its infancy. So, wow, you know, we didn't even know this was even feasible. Like, we thought this was some sort of witchcraft or magic or something going on. But then we came to understand that, hey, it's an infrared sensor in the robot's eyes. And then we finally, in order to play the game, could put the gyro where it's supposed to be. It took forever. So we finally started pressing buttons anyways. But the game was good. The game was good. Was it a gimmick? Yes, it was. But was it a functional gimmick? Well, yeah, it was. Now, the other game that was packed in with the NES was Duck Hunt. And Duck Hunt was a one-screen game where you basically had to use a light gun, and whenever you pressed the trigger, you would shoot one of the ducks. If you killed all the ducks, the dog would jump in and get the ducks, and you could move on to the next level, right? But if you didn't, the dog would freaking laugh at you. He would intimidate you and taunt you, like, you know, make fun of you. Like, what gives, you know? And yeah, we tried to shoot the freaking dog, but the dog wouldn't die. To this day, I want to kill that goddamn dog. But yeah, the game was phenomenal for what it did. Again, light guns were not a thing back in the day. This was our first console that I could remember that had a light gun. So yeah, it was good. Again, it had the same things. It had good music. And it was engaging. It was fun. It was something that, you know, like you could play, and when the dog made fun of you because you lost the level, you'd give the gun to somebody else, and then they'd lose, and then you'd make fun of them. It was a fun time to be had. Now, if the only games that the NES launched with were these two gimmick games, then I can understand that, yeah, maybe it wasn't such a big deal of a console. But there were some other games that were also sold along with the console that basically helped supplant or implant the NES as the go-to console of our generation at that time. And the first of which was Excitebike. Excitebike, when it launched, was also revolutionary because it actually looked like a guy riding a motorcycle as opposed to a rectangular box with polygonal wheels. And again, just like Gyromite, just like Duck Hunt, the music was engaging. The graphics were great. There was levels. There was a changing backgrounds, etc. And there were different platforms that you had to sort of scale over with your motorcycle to win the race. But that wasn't the thing that really clinched Excitebike as one of the better games for that generation at the time. The best part of Excitebike was it was the first game that had a level editor. Now you guys with Minecraft and all this other stuff out there, Zelda, everything is all has a level editor built in these days. I think it's almost required. But back in the day with Excitebike, it was the first time you could, hey, wait a minute, you can create your own levels. You could put your own platforms. You could put your own ramps. You could do whatever you wanted to do. And then once you finished making it, you can play that level, which, I mean, I know it sounds kind of silly right now, but put yourself in the spot of a kid, a 9-year-old kid in 1986. That was something that blew your mind. That was like, oh my God, I didn't even know this was feasible. So yeah, it had, and because of that level editor, and it had infinite replayability. My friends would make levels, I would make levels, and we would like challenge each other. We'd make a level, and we'd let our friends play it and see if they could beat it, and it was fun. It was not only a game, but it was also a social experiment as well, because you and your friends could take turns trying to make sure that the other one failed miserably in the race. And that was Excitebike. The next game that was also launched during that Christmas was Kung Fu. Now, Kung Fu was different as well because Kung Fu actually allowed us to play or relive our fantasies of being Bruce Lee. You were this guy who moved left to right, up and left to right, and you had to kill all these little henchmen, if you will. And the phenomenal thing about this game was not that, the music was good, of course, the graphics were good for the time. But the thing that really cinched this game for me was the inclusion of mini bosses. So basically, Kung Fu, you had to save your girlfriend. It was a very rudimentary story, but it still had a story nonetheless. And you had to scale this building, and you had to go and clear like each floor. And at the end of each floor, it was a main boss or a mini boss. And once you beat the mini boss, then you would go up a flight of stairs and then you go to the next level, which was the next floor of the building. And you kept doing this until you beat the game. But I never had mini bosses. I've never fought a mini boss before this in any 2600 game. And yeah, it was a phenomenal thing. And each mini boss looked differently. There was like this big muscular African-American guy dude. There was this like little midget guy. There was this like Johnny character from Karate Kid who was the main boss. And they all looked different and they all laughed. If you lost against them, they would laugh at you. They would taunt you. These were emotions that we were getting in a game that we were never accustomed to. Games did not have mini bosses. Games did not laugh at you and make fun of you because you lost. Like Duck Hunt, the dog would laugh at you when you lost. Like, hey, wait a minute. This is not only my friends laughing at me, but the freaking game is laughing at me. Like, are you serious? No, I got something to prove to this freaking game. So yeah, I mean, Kung Fu was ahead of its time because of all it did with mini bosses and just the character development and the characters and everything. It was great. It was great. But all of those games aside, the biggest game in Christmas of 1986, bar none, that came or could have been purchased for the NES was Super Mario Brothers. Now, Super Mario Brothers was only playable in the arcades before this. And while it was fun in the arcades, it was a quarter muncher basically. And when we got a chance to play this game at home and we didn't have to go and beg our parents for 4 quarters or 8 quarters or whatever many quarters it took, it was a whole nother level. In fact, the game was redesigned to be different on the home console than it was in the arcade. The arcade was more built towards hardcore and trying to get you to feed in as many quarters as you can. There's no quarters to give to the home console, so Nintendo made the game a little bit less difficult, I would say, but still have the same character of the game, the same characteristics, the same aura of the game, if you will. They just made it a little bit easier to play. And well, what was so great about Super Mario Brothers? Well, first and foremost was the music. I mean, with Five Nights at Freddy's and Undertale and all this, you guys are used to listening to music, gaming music. But gaming music wasn't a thing back in the day. I mean, we've had people making songs based off of games. Like there was the hit that was Pac-Man Fever when Pac-Man came out. There was a music video made inspired by Pac-Man. But gaming music in and of itself was okay at the time. But with Super Mario Brothers, that music was infectious. It was like all of the little soundtracks were earworms that you couldn't get out of your brain. And there's to go show you those same riffs are still used today in gaming. The Super Mario musics, the one-up flower, the powering up flower, the invisibility music, the dungeons music, the bridges music, the swimming music, they're all iconic these days. I mean, but back in the day, this was the first time we listened to any of this music. So this music just blew our mind. Like, wow, how can music be that good? But it was more than that. You could go left to right and you can go up and down, and there was never anything like that. I mean, there was no verticality in gaming. There was barely a screen. Usually most games only hit or settled on one or two screens at best. This game kept consistently scrolling, and you can go not only left and right, but you can check for up and down as well. Next was the controls. The controls were very phenomenal. They were very tight. I mean, very phenomenal. Like you literally would press a button and Mario would run. And if you get a good momentum going, you could run. If Mario was in his super form and he was running, he could skip over certain gaps that you didn't have to jump over. So you learn tricks based off of the controls. And when you change directions, guess what? Mario immediately changed directions. So yeah, the controls were so precise and so fluid that when you died, you knew that you made the mistake. It wasn't the game or the program that made you lose. It was your own inability to do what you were supposed to do, because the controls were 1-to-1. Now, also, of course, the characters. There were so many characters as well. You had Koopa Troopers. You had different colors of Koopa Troopers. You had Goombas. You had Cheep Cheeps. You had this little flying turtle called Laitiku. You had the Hammer Brothers. You had the little fishes. You had the little squids. I mean, the world was populated with all these different creatures that you never saw before. And they looked like what they're supposed to look like. A turtle looked like a freaking turtle. A mushroom looked like a freaking mushroom, you know? And a bird looked like a bird. And a squid looked like a squid. And it was phenomenal. It was great. I mean, you saw all of this stuff, and you know, you're coming off of a generation where all you saw were rectangles moving left to right. And now you saw squids, you saw birds, you saw mushrooms and stuff like that. And another thing that the game allowed you to do was power up. There again, a new game mechanic that was never heretofore seen. You got a flower, you started spitting fires. You took a mushroom, you got bigger. And if you took a star, you would be invincible with the music in the background. And everything that touched you died. So this was like unheard of. And remember, back in the day, we were only used to playing these levels, this quality of game, these types of quality of games only on arcades. And in arcades, it was like a one-hit death. Here, if you had a mushroom or you had a fire flower, you had a second hit that you can basically endure, if you will. So these were all concepts or things that were placed in the game that made it unlike anything else. But what really made the game one of the best games of all time and helped implant Nintendo as one of the de facto game developers of all time was the inclusion of secrets. Well, first of all, there was no exploration back in the day in gaming because there was no screens. Like there was only one or two screens and there was only one or two things to do in each screen. Whereas in this game, there was a continually scrolling screen, and you could find things. You could find things that didn't exist before, like that were not in the main level. Like, for example, there was like an infinite one-up trick, where if you hit the turtle at the right time, your bounce would constantly be bouncing off the turtle, and you would eventually get these infinite amount of one-ups that you can play indefinitely if you'd like. There was Minus World. There was this world where you can go, and of course it was a glitch back. Now we know it's a glitch, but back in the day we thought it was like a secret world, this little thing that you could do, and you would get transported to a whole different world called Minus World. And you had warp pipes. You had these little secrets that you can go to, secret places that you can go to if you're looking carefully enough, and it would help you skip a level or 2 levels or 3 levels. And yeah, then there was the other secret was like you hit certain blocks, you got a beanstalk, and you would walk all the way up to whatever, the clouds, and walk back and forth, and there were levels in the clouds. So this game had all of that. Impressive music, impressive character designs, impressive characters, different changing backgrounds, power-ups, secrets. It had it all. It was engaging for not only the kids, but for the elders too, who bought the console to begin with. I famously remember my father, he hates gaming. If my kids are watching, yes, your grandfather actually enjoyed playing Super Mario Brothers. And your mom, she hates gaming, and she enjoys Super Mario Brothers. And there's something to be said about a game that can be played 40 years later and still have the same effect as it did when you first played it. How do you beat that? So these were the games that I got. These were the games that launched with the NES, and these were the games that basically helped solidify the NES as the go-to console. And the best part about these games is that they allowed for discussions in school. The best part of playing with the NES was waking up the next morning and going to school, and then during recess or during lunch, you'd sit on the table and be talking with your friends. Oh my God, did you do this secret? Did you find this? Did you do this? Did you find this? It was a social experiment as well. They took this formula and ran with it exponentially. There was games like Zelda. There was games like Foxanadu. There was games, all of the games that you guys are used to in today's society have their originations in this NES area with Castlevania, Metal Gear, Ninja Gaiden, Contra, Tetris, Dragon Warrior, Final Fantasy, Punch-Out. All these games had that same winning formula. Character design, music, sometimes there were secrets. Yeah, this is where it all started. In 1986, the first Christmas with the NES, because of the games and how they approached everything. And to this day, that will always be, in my memory, the best Christmas of all time. And it is basically the first Christmas where I identified as a gamer. So I hope you liked the video. There's going to be more videos for this. My next one is going to be Zelda, and why Zelda basically made me the gamer that I am today, and what was so miraculous or revolutionary, if you will, about Zelda. So if you made it this far, I want to thank you for sitting with me for this amount of time and listening to me ramble on and on. If you'd like to see more videos like this, hit the like and subscribe button, and in the comment section, please leave a comment as to, number one, how I can improve this, and number two, what other videos you'd like to see, and what were your biggest gaming memories as a kid. This would be my number one. 1986 Christmas was the best Christmas ever because it made me into a gamer. So until next time, guys, Wize out.